All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to get into a subject that is probably my favorite subject. It's probably one of the teachings that I do the most when I've traveled and spoken in other places, but it's one that we have available that's only been available in audio form. It's one of the older teachings, and it's also one that I've always wanted to do in a much more extensive type of format. You know, kind of like I've told you guys before, teachings that used to be 1 and 2 parts have now turned into 7 and 14. Well, that's probably what's going to happen here with this one. If we had a proper fear of Yahweh, everything else would fall right into place. I really believe that. If we could properly have a proper fear, awe, reverence, exactly, I'm going to explain what that all means here in a minute. If we could have that in line and in place, I think that all the other pieces would naturally start to fall into place. Here's Moses with the Israelites, and they're standing at the Jordan ready to go into the land, and they're probably all asking the same question to some degree, which is, what is it that Yahweh wants of us? What does he expect of us? And so here we find, it says, and now Yisrael, what is it that Yahweh, your Elohim, is asking of you? I think that's a great question. So here's the answer that Moses gives. But to fear Yahweh, your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve him, to serve Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your being, to guard the commands of Yahweh and his laws, which I command you today for your good. So here we're reading in 10, 12, and 13, what I believe is a specific process, a specific order to how Abba wants us to develop the things he wants us to develop. But he wants us to fear Yahweh. Then he wants us, because we're afraid, reverencing, in awe of Yahweh, whatever that word fear means, because we're doing that, then we're more likely to walk in all his ways. And then after we walk in all his ways, we discover that his ways do 3 things. They bless us, they keep us safe, and they help change us from what we are into what he is. And so then we realize that his ways express how much he loves us. And guess what happens as a natural manifestation of being loved? We start to love him. All of us should be able to look in our lives to find those places where you could not see the solution. Because here's Moses telling them there's a solution coming. They still don't know what it is. We've all read the story and seen the movie, so we know what's coming. I mean, we're all thinking, come on, guys, calm down. He's going to split the sea. Do you think anybody there thought that? Do you think anybody sitting there looking out of the water going, well, you know, if Yahweh would just part that sea, we can get across that thing on dry land. We'll be all right. Nobody is thinking this. They can't see the solution coming, but Moses says, stand still and see the deliverance. So what is this to teach us here? When you are afraid and walking in fear of man or circumstances, you are to at some point realize that you need to get quiet and stand still and allow him to open up what's going to happen. So I want us to be able to take a deep breath and be still when you get into that horrible place where you can't see a way out. Because that's the place that if you would be still, he would work with you. But now, he may not do anything until you actually calm down and be still. How many of you have had a child throwing the temper tantrum because they want the whatever, and you say, if you would just calm down, I can help you. Right? All of us parents have done that with children. If you would just calm down, I can help you. Because they're frustrated and they can't get something done, or they're in pain or something's going on and they're freaking out, and he's like, please just calm down and I can help you. I think our Heavenly Father's the same with us. He says, calm down. I'm happy to help you, but you need to calm down first. And that's where we get into that place of trust, emunah, belief, okay, trust, belief, faith, where we can then say, Abba, I know that you allowed me to be in the situation or caused it to happen for me to learn to fear you more. For me to respect you even more, for me to believe even more. He led them through the wilderness. I think that's the idea of everybody's life is being led through a wilderness. And everybody's life is being led through the wilderness so that you can learn to become humble. So maybe you want to write down Deuteronomy 8:2 there for yourself. To learn to be humble so that he can test to prove whether it's in your heart to keep his commandments. And by the way, embrace what he's really saying there. He's not having any expectation of perfect obedience. He has an expectation of you wanting to be perfect. Let me say that again. He doesn't have any expectation of perfection. In other words, people say, oh, well, who could ever keep everything perfectly? It doesn't say that. He wants to see whether it's in your heart to want to do it. whether it's in your heart. See, when you try to find excuses to bend and twist the Torah to your own desires, to allow for what you want, then you're showing him it's not in your heart to just obey him. When you're trying to figure out what the least is you can do, then it's not in your heart to obey him. And all the children of Israel grumbled against, are they grumbling against Yahweh? No. Yes and no. No, they're grumbling against Moses because they want to go against the man. See, they're not going to go directly to Yahweh because they're afraid to do that. So they're going to grumble against Moses. But remember what we told you, if you grumble against the anointed appointed, well, I didn't use that phrase earlier, but I've used it in a lot of teachings. The leadership, we call that the anointed appointed. They've been anointed of Yahweh and appointed to a position of authority. When you do anything negative to that person, it's like you're doing it to Yahweh. Oh, but you'll say to me, well, how do I know if my leader's an anointed appointed? That's a good question. Look at their fruit. Look what they're doing. But not just what they're doing now, but maybe what they were doing before, because you may be coming into them when their King Saul having already lost his mind. Because if you came into Israel when King Saul had already lost his mind, you would have thought there's no way this guy has fruit as being an anointed appointed. David knew he was an anointed appointed, so that's why David did not want to touch him. He wouldn't say one negative word about him, because you do not talk that way against Yahweh's representatives. But we have no fear of that. Go on Facebook right now. Well, you can't do it right now, but when you go on Facebook, you'll see leadership being attacked and slandered and smeared all over the place. And I promise you, some of them, absolutely not all of them, but some of them are anointed appointeds. And since you don't know, you ought to be careful. Really, think about it. But we have no shame and we have no honor in our society anymore like they used to be. That was the big focus, shame and honor. But yet we attack and we do what we do because we don't understand. See, unfortunately, as adults, we'll read the fifth commandment and think, oh, that's for children. Honor your mother and father. It's a children's commandment. Well, yes and no. If you are a child, yes, you need to learn to honor your mother and father. What if you never learned to do that, though? Now you still need to learn it. Because if you never learned to honor mother and father, I guarantee you didn't honor your bosses, your teachers, or whatever. Because you didn't learn to honor authority. That's the importance of that transitional verse. And the reason I say transitional commandment, because people usually say the first 4 commandments are for Yahweh, the last 6 are for man. Well, actually, number 5 is for both. Because he is your father. And if we don't learn to honor our mother and father on the earth, we're never going to honor our Heavenly Father. And Yeshua talked about that too. If you can't show honor and respect, how are you ever going to honor and respect correctly, vertically? And yet, what does it come down to? Fear. We have children running around with no fear. They're afraid of nothing. They're afraid of nothing. I think the body's filled with people that way too. I see people doing stuff and saying stuff and acting whatever they're doing all over the internet and everywhere else. And I sit there going, these people have no shame and no fear of any kind of reprisal. And then I watch people in discussion groups listening to faceless people who they have no idea who these people are, and they take them as if they're authorities, and I'm like, why are you listening to these faceless people that you know nothing about? We have to learn to be much more fearful of Yahweh, and that means that he expects us to be respectful of each other and of him. We're supposed to walk in the Ruach and the fruit. You don't see the kindness and gentleness and meekness and all that other stuff. Do you on Facebook most of the time? No. I see people getting thrown out of groups every day because they're not able to behave in a respectful way. And this all comes back to the fear of Yahweh. If they would have a proper fear of Yahweh, they would have a respect for Yahweh that then would overflow into the way we fear and respect each other.